There's so many times I actually don't want to do it. I could just have a therapy practice and this could be simple, and something calls me back in and says, no, you have to like keep showing up for this.
Welcome to the 9 to 5 Quitters Club, the podcast uncovering the creator entrepreneurs at the forefront of a work revolution. Today we're speaking with Kyle Bueller, psychologist and co-founder of Psychedelics Today, an educational platform dedicated to leading harm reduction across the globe for people exploring their consciousness in an effort to heal and better understand their lives. Starting as a podcast to explore these concepts, the business grew into a thriving company that primarily educates curious medical professionals on how to navigate a complex topic fraught with misinformation and a history of political strife. In this episode, we unpack Kyle's journey to exploring this field.
My dad told me that when I left the first aid station at the ski resort, they looked at him and said, your son's in his golden hours and he may not make it.
How their business evolved over time to focus on primarily serving medical professionals.
They want to know how to have conversations with their clients about it, or they want to know how to integrate it into their practice.
And make sure to stick around for some tips on how to take even the most personal elements of in-person education online in a way that can still foster powerful transformations.
I have like an hour or so blocked afterwards, so if somebody does need to stick around, we can have a conversation. I'm not just like, okay, this class is over, see you later.
Kyle and his journey is an inspiring exploration into the drive creators have to help others through sharing their lived experiences, even when it's clearly the hardest way to build a business. Let's dive in, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Kyle Bueller.
I've always been interested in consciousness in some way. Even as a kid, I always used to love dreaming, and I felt like I was just always kind of tapped into something. And then that all started to kind of fade away, you know, as you grow and your brain evolves. And then I had a really traumatic snowboarding accident when I was 16. I ended up rupturing my spleen and getting medevaced over to the hospital, and found out that I was only about like 5 or 10 minutes later of being dead on arrival. I remember my dad told me that when I left the first aid station at the ski resort, they looked at him and said, you know, your son's in his golden hours and he may not make it. So that experience really changed my life. I came out of that experience going like, what am I doing here? Why am I still alive? I was like really confused. And I was a sophomore in high school. So, you know, that's a time when, you know, teenagers are trying to find themselves and form their identity a little bit. And I just fell into a pretty heavy existential crisis, just trying to figure out like who I am, what I'm doing here, just trying to figure out like, you know, why the hell does the world operate in the way it operates? And just left me really confused. I didn't have any sort of like mentors or anything like that to help me through that. And then when I was about 19, I had an experience with psilocybin mushrooms. A friend of mine just kind of gave them to me, and we went out into the woods, and I didn't really know too much about it. I never really experimented with too many drugs. I was pretty straight edge all through high school, didn't want to touch anything, just because I was so thankful to be alive. I'm like, why do people want to like alter their consciousness? This is, you know, it's beautiful just to be here. And then that experience had me relive my near-death experience in a pretty unique way. And I came out of that kind of scratching my head, like going like, how could somebody ingest something that grows from the earth that could replicate death like that? And so it really helped me to recontextualize some of the trauma that I went through, and helped to actually give me more meaning and purpose in my life. And so I went from a very depressed, kind of a lot of suicidal ideation, to wanting to live my life, finding some sort of meaning and purpose in my life after that experience. And I just became so intellectually curious around what the hell is going on here? Like, how can something like this have such a profound impact on consciousness? And, you know, there could be some therapeutic potential here. And, you know, is there any research into this? And so I started kind of digging in, and I found this little unique school in Vermont called Burlington College. And they had a transpersonal psychology program there. And so I ended up doing my undergrad in transpersonal psychology. So my whole focus there was to study psychedelics, to study non-ordinary states of consciousness, the healing potential of those states. And during that time, I met two teachers, Lenny and Elizabeth Gibson, and they were my breathwork teachers. So they were trained in a technique called holotropic breathwork, which was developed by a pioneer in psychedelic therapy, Dr. Stanislav Grof, and his former wife, Christina Grof. And just so fortunate to come across a lot of great teachers at that school, a lot of great mentors to help me kind of process a lot of this like kind of trauma in an intellectual way, but also like an emotional way, like holding that space. And during that, or I guess a little bit after that time, I met a gentleman, Joe Moore, who was part of the breathwork community. He was originally from New Hampshire, and then he ended up out in Colorado. So by the time I got to that breathwork organization, Joe has already left, but they kept asking me, they're like, do you know Joe? Like, you guys should really connect. And I was like, no. They're like, you guys are both into breathwork, psychedelics, snowboarding, all this stuff. Like, you guys just seem like you'd be a really great pair. So we ended up connecting in 2014, 2015. And that was the start of a conversation around wanting to kind of archive some of our teachers' lectures and like some of their lineage so we could go back and also, think about like, okay, like where can we listen to some of their talks? And in 2016, that started to really evolve into what now is Psychedelics Today, which is a media and education company. We primarily focus on education. The media side is our podcast, blog articles, and stuff like that. But I also feel like that's education related as well. And so it started in 2016 as a little passion project. It was like this archival project starting off, and then Joe already had 2 podcasts in the past, and I didn't really know how to create a podcast, so I was really thankful that like he knew all the tech and stuff like that. And we wanted to have conversations just, around psychedelics, breathwork, transpersonal psychology, the work of Stan Groff. And I mean, it was awesome because I started having all these conversations with people I was writing papers about. I was looking, they were like mentors from a distance, and I'm like, this is kind of crazy. Like, all of a sudden I'm getting to chat with people like I write papers about. And so we started this project again in 2016. I just started my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling and somatic psychology. So I was kind of starting this project and doing my master's in counseling. I always kind of made a joke that I was doing like a self-study MBA along with my counseling degree because I knew, once it started to grow, I'm like, I know nothing about business or marketing and all this stuff. So it's been a journey. It's been fun. But yeah, it really kind of started off as this little passion project. And our goal with the organization is just to help educate people around the healing potential of non-ordinary states, whether that's through psychedelics or breath work and other kind of techniques, and also help to reduce the risks and potential harms that are involved there. So really trying to keep people safe. This is kind of a very budding topic. People are becoming more interested in it. And so where are people looking for that type of information as it's starting to hit more mainstream avenues and people are, kind of wanting to take a little bit of their healing into their own hands and explore.
It started with the podcast. What was kind of the moment when you as a group said, oh, this is our mission, this is what we're going to do, and it can work, like this can actually be a business?
Yeah, so like I said, Joe and I didn't really start off as like this is a business, right? It was just like he had a full-time job, I was doing grad school. We wanted to have fun, and it was like, oh, that's awesome. We're just getting to interview people we really look up to. And then we're like, there's hosting fees, it's taking a lot of time to produce the show. And so we were thinking, is there a way to, make some money just to help to pay some of the hosting bills, our time for producing the show? I already had some experience with curriculum development and teaching. So at the undergrad school that I went to, for my capstone project, I ended up creating a 16-week course called Stanislav Grof's Psychology of Extraordinary Experiences. And then the following year, we were invited back to teach a course on the history of psychedelics. And so we were actually trying to create this self-study master's program at the college and have a focus in psychedelic studies. And then unfortunately, the college kind of tanked and fell apart in 2016. And so when we were thinking like, how do we make some money? I don't know how it even came up, but we're like, maybe we can teach a course. I think online learning at that time just started to kind of come on board. And, it was kind of funny when I was doing my undergrad and I first taught that class in 2013. I was actually going back into some of these old notebooks and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to like, improve the college experience by bringing guest facilitators in and like, how can we really leverage video and, some of these other things. And this was like way before all this stuff started kicking off. And so, I think with that idea, we were like, okay, let's sell a course. And so we started to kind of search around, be like, how do we even sell a course? Like, what are there course selling platforms? And, that's when we came across Teachable. And so that's when that started to become more of a business of like, okay, we do need to make money if we want to keep this show going. Any income that comes in from the show is going to support the production of that free resource for the community, because that's something, we never wanted to really completely monetize. Like, we've done ads in the past and we've done some sponsorship stuff, but we've always really liked it as a free resource for the community. And so, yeah, that's really kind of how the business started to form. And then around, I think it was like 2018, psychedelics started to just really take off in the public. That's when a lot of the research was starting to come out a little bit more. More academic papers were being published. And then Michael Pollan released a book called How to Change Your Mind. And at that time, I think 90% of our emails started with, I just read Michael Pollan's book. Like, I'm interested in this. So he had a huge impact on culture. And then, then it just started to really grow at that point. And we said, hey, we need to really take on, let's hire some folks. We need people to help us. And then so it really started to then grow beyond us at that point.
I want to frame something quick. What is it that you teach? Because it's not like how to do drugs. What is your curriculum? And can you just frame for us like how you're approaching having that positive impact?
Yeah, great question. So there's lots of different courses we offer. I'll focus primarily on our kind of flagship program, and that's called Vital. And that's a 12-month program, which started off as a smaller course called Navigating Psychedelics, Lessons on Self-Care and Integration. And the primary goal of that was to help teach people about harm reduction practices. So if people are going to do this, what are best practices? What's the research saying? And how to stay safe? Because, we really kind of operate from this harm reduction vein that people are doing this stuff. They're reading headlines, they're maybe hearing stuff from friends, and then they just have no clue. So while we're not necessarily saying this is the instruction on how to do it, we're talking about big picture, this is how to stay safe with some of this stuff. And then that started to grow into, wow, a lot of professionals are actually starting to take this course and they want to know how to have conversations with their clients about it, or they want to know how to integrate it into their practice. And then so that started to form into really catering to professionals, clinicians, doctors, therapists. And so with our Vital program, that's really transformed into a full 12-month program. And we really focus on training professionals that have been reading about the research. They're interested in, maybe how do I integrate this into my practice when it becomes legal? So they're helping to, give the best information to their clients, keeping them safe while also, protecting their licenses as well.
I think the business side is interesting because you are right in the crosshairs of this ongoing conversation of what are social platforms' responsibilities to enforce what level of information. Then you're right in the midst of that. Why the heck do you keep doing such a challenging thing?
Oh, man, that's a wonderful question. For me, it feels like some sort of calling. There's so many times I actually don't want to do it. There's so many times where I'm like, this is taboo, this is controversial, there's so much political stuff to deal with. I don't want to deal with this. And then I kind of want to back away from it because of the challenges. I'm like, oh, I could just have a therapy practice and, this could be simple. And, I could also do something I really enjoy. But every time I try to get away from it, something calls me back in and says, no, you have to keep showing up for this. And I'm like, okay. So, I keep showing up for that. The other reason too is, the amount of emails we get from folks and the feedback we get, there's been so many times where somebody has said, you guys got me through such hard times. For example, I listened to you all throughout, the pandemic, and you really got me through that. Somebody told me when they were trying to leave a country that they lived in, they were like, I had you in my ears the entire time as I was trying to flee this country to go over somewhere else. And I'm just like, whoa, this is wild. And then the information that we provide on the podcast, I think has really changed people's lives where, they're really struggling, and they hear an episode about some sort of topic and they go, oh my god, like I didn't know about this. And then the ironic thing is, like, sometimes the connections that happen, I get so many people like, oh man, I listened to that episode, I reached out to so and so, and I got a job with this person, and I'm like, whoa. So it's like, the impact. And that's also what kind of keeps me, dedicated to our mission, is that, it feels like we are making a big impact for the people that are really interested in this topic. And yeah, the days where I'm like, I'm so done with this, because the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur and starting a business can be really challenging. And it's like that one heartfelt email where it was like, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Like, you're changing people's lives. And I go, okay, yeah, it feels like we are doing something really important here. And even though the challenges are sometimes a struggle, and, I think it makes it worthwhile to keep charging forward in a totally new field, being a pioneer, which can, again, it can be challenging, lots of ups and downs as a business owner. So that's what really keeps me going. I'm sure I could probably speak for others on the team. That's, everybody's so mission aligned. And I think it's the mission and then like the feedback from the community that really, really kind of keeps us going during challenging and hard times.
We'll be right back after this quick break. I hear a lot from people like, I'm just trying to help who I was 5 years ago, and like just share that. I
think about that, like what you said, like, helping myself 5 years ago. I think about the 16-year-old Kyle that was really struggling. And again, this wasn't psychedelic related. This was a near-death experience from my snowboarding accident, where I just felt so utterly alone and I couldn't talk to anybody. And there's people that feel the same way. And I go, like, what did that 16-year-old self need? And it wasn't until I got to Burlington College, I met a teacher, his name was Michael Watson, and he was teaching this eco-psychology course, and he was talking about shamanism and all this stuff. And I shared my story with him. And he just looked at me and said, if you grew up in a traditional culture, the elders would have stepped in and taught you this new way of being and seeing in the world. Unfortunately, you didn't grow up in that culture, so you needed to figure it out yourself. And that was one of the first times I ever felt heard and seen, like, from my experience. And I was like, wow, like somebody understands this. And so, again, that's kind of what keeps me going. It's like, what did, my 16-year-old, 19-year-old self need during those times, and just wanting to show up and provide that to others.
On a little bit of a business side, because I wanted to ask you about this, like, with the interest of your mission, are there things you do to mitigate the changing landscape? Like, how do you safeguard your ability to continue when regulations, or like the bill you were talking about in Colorado, could shut down your access? Or are you kind of just along for the ride?
A little bit of both, like along for the ride, see, like, and that's a very kind of like psychedelic mindset of like, buy a ticket, take the ride, and we have no idea what's going to happen. But no, there are things that we do try to do with like business risk mitigation. So always assessing what type of things we are doing, checking with the law, some of our legal counsel, and figuring out like, we want to stay 100% above board and not do anything that could potentially put the business at risk. So we're constantly thinking about some of that stuff. It's always been a fear of like, what kind of platform is going to like implement what rules and stuff like that. And again, with banking too, I mean, we've had issues in the field with folks losing their accounts, even though they're like in media and education and just doing stuff that's 100% above board. But it's because of the topic. And, sometimes businesses will see that as quote unquote like high risk business activities, and they just don't want to do business with them. So we're just always trying to look at like what are we doing and do a lot of risk mitigation there.
I hear this a lot from early creators excited they have something they want to share, but they'll often say like, yeah, but I just don't believe I can do this in an online environment, whether it's like family health or stuff. They feel like it has to be in person. How do you bring those kind of experiential practices of education into an at least semi-digital space?
Yeah, this was a concern with when launching Vital, because we wanted Vital to be specifically very experientially oriented. When I was kind of visioning it, I had the idea that it was going to be all in person, and it was going to revolve around retreats and people having more hands-on learning in that way. And then the pandemic happened, and we said, well, we can't keep delaying this. We want to get this out there to the world, because people keep asking us for a longer type of training program. So I had to really wrestle with myself. And, I think this is really great when you have a business partner and a team to work with. It's like, that helps you kind of get outside of your own thinking at times, because I can get really rigid in my thinking and I'm like, no, this is exactly, what's going to happen. But at the same time, we knew we wanted to incorporate breath work into it. And we were like, we have no idea if we're going to ever be able to do breath work again. You're breathing in a room and,
right.
And we're just like, what is this going to look like now that we have this respiratory virus that's circulating? Maybe we're never going to be able to do breath work again. And so, we really had to take that into consideration. And we did include retreats into it that first year. I think as we were coming out, okay, we can kind of experiment with this. We can do one retreat. We'll have the online component for the year. They have their study groups. So it's not just going into, say, a lecture. You're getting lectured at every week. You do have the lecture every week, but then we have the study groups where people then start to form their peer connections in a smaller, intimate group of, say, 18 to 20. And then in those groups, that's when we can also do the experiential learning and kind of practical learning where we can do breakout groups in Zoom. And so, maybe we have a breakout room of two people and then they're doing a role play. And then so it's like, okay, role play, I'm going to have a conversation with a client that wants to do this. How is that conversation going to unfold? How could you incorporate some of these harm reduction principles into this conversation? And then they'll be able to do that. We love to incorporate self-reflective practices like journaling. Most of our study group instructors will start off their study group with a meditation and something self-reflected. So we're incorporating that, just to ground beforehand. And especially in this world where experiential learning on this, nature, doing breath work online. I mean, there's a lot of trauma that can come up for folks. And so now you have to really consider, if we are going to do something like this online, how do we make sure that we're able to hold space for people? So if that does emerge, we're not just like, all right, see you later, So say in a session like that, we're able to say, hey, if you're having a difficult time, message one of us, we'll be here. We can go into a breakout group so we're not disturbing everybody else. And then I'm making sure my schedule isn't, I don't have a call right after this. I have an hour or so blocked afterwards. So if somebody does need to stick around, we can have a conversation. I'm not just like, okay, this class is over, see you later. But really thinking about how can I continue to support somebody if something difficult comes up during those experiential things. But I think, we've really adapted since the pandemic to have more kind of these online experiences. And, a lot of people are pretty resistant to it. And, I think ideally in-person learning is wonderful. But there are those times, say, people can't travel. And I think that's what I love about the online learning. It's we have students across the world.
Yeah.
And I'm just mind blown, people in Thailand that are signing up and this and that. I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. If it was all in person, we wouldn't have that diversity and inclusion. And so it is exciting to be able to have, such a diverse student population, but it is a part of getting out of your own way and saying, okay, maybe I can do this. It might not be ideal, but, how do I try to have some sort of best practices around whatever that is for somebody that is listening and wants to do something experiential?
What do you think is the number one way this work has impacted you in your daily life that you didn't expect getting into this?
There's a lot of things. I think getting in touch with my own morals and values at times. And I think that's like pretty unique sometimes to this field, where a lot of us are having really deep self-reflective experiences, and we're starting to like maybe question the status quo or question, do I really believe in this about myself? And so I think it's that like self-reflective process. And I've talked to like others in our field, and there's this kind of like generalized joke that like for the folks that I've talked to, where it's like, I think this work has helped us build resilience. And you know, there's times where we go, man, like if I wasn't doing this work, what would the pandemic be like? You know, because like when chaos is unfolding, I think there are some folks within this field that can just feel really grounded, right? Because it's like we've been through, you know, utter chaos in these, you know, transformative experiences. And I think that helps us to prepare for the difficulty in life. And I do think about that, where I'm like, man, yeah, I've been, you know, with all the stuff that's happening in the world, like I feel like some of this inner work has just made me more grounded and, you know, resilient in some way. You know, we're all human. We're not like all enlightened, and, you know, things are going to get to us. We're going to get triggered. We're going to get pissed off. Things are going to be a struggle. We're probably going to sit there and question what is going on when the world is falling apart. But I think there is something where, yeah, that resilience has been kind of strengthened, because most folks that are into this are voluntarily trying to confront some of their shadow aspects and confront these like really deep, dark places in their psyche. And I think when we can start to confront some of that and start to develop a relationship with it, it helps us in our daily life later on, going, okay, like, you know, I've been through something like this before. How can I just like take a couple deep breaths, recenter, reground? And so I think that's probably been, yeah, maybe one of like the biggest things that has impacted me doing a lot of this work, is just trying to be a little bit more grounded, be here a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for taking the time. I have just some like really quick questions for you before we wrap up. Number one book you've read that changed your opinion about something?
It's called The Blind Spot: Why Science Can't Ignore Human Experience. And so it's really also challenging a bit of the scientific paradigm, which most of us, you know, live in and depend on, to take in other perspectives, other ways of knowing, other ways of perceiving reality. And so I don't know, I can't recommend it. I'm not through it, but even just the opening chapter got me really thinking about how a lot of science is based off of extraction, and they use this temperature, for example, right? Like, you know, we might look at, say, oh, it's 60 degrees outside because my weather app says that. 60 degrees in California on the coast is freaking cold. Or like, for example, like here in Colorado, I went out on the 4th of July. I'm up in Breckenridge. It was 48 degrees. I was sweating because I'm so much closer to the sun. But the temperature on the phone is saying this is what it should feel like. And so just even thinking about how that number is really an abstraction, but our human experience is really kind of dictating how we're experiencing the world.
I love it. Kyle, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Jonah. Thank you, Teachable, for having me on here. This has been such a blast.
Hope to talk to you in the near future. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.
Kyle is a great example of the kind of deeply mission-driven mindset we see at the root of every creator we talk to, and how they leverage education as a means to turn that mission into a sustainable business. I hope you learned as much as I did today, found something you can apply to your life, and if nothing else, were inspired by Kyle's story to take a hard look at the 9-to-5 work you do and make sure that the way you work is working for you. If you want to join the thousands of other creative entrepreneurs who are building an income out of their impact, click the link in the description to join the club and learn how Teachable can help you do the same. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our recommended next episode linked here. Thanks again for being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.